Hi, thank you for having me. Again, it's lovely to be back at Notwestminster. And I should just say, for those who didn't clock yet, there is the follow-up to that little talk, to lightning talk just now, is a workshop at 12, which you should go to. And the relations between the lightning talks and the workshops is one that's making me quite anxious, because this is the most immediate review I will ever have for a talk, because we're about to run a workshop immediately after this. So if this is terrible, then I'm going to know pretty quickly when I'm standing alone in a workshop room. So what I run an organisation called the New Citizenship Project. Our work is all about bringing the skills of the creative industries and beyond to bear on thinking of people as citizens rather than just as consumers. And we work across all different aspects of society, and the underlying framework for our work, which has got slightly stretched because I sent Diane the wrong format of slides, so I apologise if everything I show you is very tall. But we work with this set of ideas that there's a shift going on in the idea of the individual in society from subject to consumer to citizen. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this for ages right now for obvious reasons, because it's a lightning talk to get us set up. But I did just want to share it briefly. So the ideas we work with apply across the sweep of organisations and sectors. And what we talk about is a shift from sort of end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, where people were something like subjects who were dependent, had stuff done to them, whose only role was to obey and receive, and for whom the right role of organisations and leaders was to command, through the second half of the 20th century becoming something like consumers, where consumers are independent, they have stuff done for them, they're capable of demanding and choosing, and the right role of organisations and leaders is to serve them. And what we argue is that what's happening right now is that story of who we are is kind of crumbling around us, and what's emerging is something like the citizen, an idea of people as interdependent, who do stuff together with each other and with organisations, who participate and create, and for whom the role of organisations and leaders is then to facilitate and enable. And we work with these ideas with all sorts of organisations from across sectors, from The Guardian to the Co-op to the BBC to Nationwide to all sorts of things. And until relatively recently, a couple of years ago, well, 18 months ago actually, we hadn't done any work in formal democracy. And it was through coming to Notwestminster and also working with My Society a little bit, who are also in the room, that we started to wonder what our work might mean here. And working with Kirklees Council has given us just the opportunity to start to explore some of this. And we've done a bit of work over the last year and more to come. So we just thought it might be a good thing to do, an interesting thing to do, to share that and offer you and sort of see what you think, really, and very much in the spirit of work that we're learning about and building as we go. So the model that we've brought to bear and that we bring to bear on all our work, we talk about organisations sustaining these stories of subject or consumer or citizen, or through three kind of main elements. There's the narrative of the organisation, the story that the organisation tells itself about what it is and what its role in the world is. The rituals, the day-to-day kind of practices that sort of embed that story, that keep it live in people's consciousness, whether they sort of know that that's happening or not. And then totems, the symbolic activities that hold that story. So, for example, the work we've done with The Guardian has been about saying, what if we tell ourselves a story that we're about equipping, what if the story we want to be about is about equipping people to be active citizens rather than just to inform society or get clicks and sell advertising? How do we make sure that the rituals, the things we measure, are sustaining that, and what are the big things that we do to embody that shift? And so that's the model that we have been starting to explore in the context of local government and with Kirklees. And where we start with, we have this another of our models is we talk about like trying to understand the starting point, like what is going on in the organisation to begin with. What's the narrative that we can make conscious first. And this is sort of what we found by talking to a lot of people, and I dare say this is replicated in a lot of places across the country, that the story of the organisation is telling itself broadly at the moment, and obviously this is a simplification, but hopefully a helpful one. The activities that the organisation does is we provide services. The response that we desire is that people use those services. And actually, while there is a kind of we want Kirklees to thrive, the sort of more immediate thing that seemed to be very present for most people most of the time, and there's a few nods in the room, like there's sort of we're trying to avoid blame rather than actually sort of, and there's this language of kind of playing to win versus playing not to lose that sort of came to mind as we were discovering some of this. And then this quote that Collaborate, another lovely organisation who we work with, we've started to work with more and more. They were doing a kind of an understanding project at the same time. And this quote came through: if something is to be done, the council has seen it as its role to do it. So this sort of, we have to do everything. The service provider narrative, the sort of the solution to everything narrative in the organisation, and how that was, and so what we wanted to do was explore, like, what if that's a story that's present without us really naming it, what might be the story that we could step into? What's the story that people, and what's the story really that people most want? And so we started to, and we work a lot with these how can we questions. Lovely to hear Kevin talking about a beautiful how can we question in the context of the Assembly of Wales. Where we got to was the question that the council might be asking, the question that the council really wanted to be asking actually was how can we provide all the services, how can we do everything for everyone, but how can we best work together with people to make the places where we all live better. And then also, because this isn't, and you'll have heard some variants on this sort of thinking before, not just the theory level, but how do we actually do this work? How do we really shift this story? Not just talk about it. What we did then was to go out and actually get people to tell us stories about when this relationship had already been at its best, on the basis that whatever story we're telling ourselves, like, this is already out there. And so and to start with, you'll see Becca. Hi, Becca. You're there. We worked with. We went to two places across across the borough and brought together groups of citizens to tell us stories about when this relationship, when they'd already felt at their most proud of the places where they live, when they felt proud to be part of something, and then tried to derive from that what was in place to make that possible, what could make it more possible more of the time. So we were sort of stepping away from how do we fix what's there and stepping into what's already emerging that we can work with more and build on. And so this was the second one. We did one of the workshops we did actually in a primary school with kids and parents exploring that future together. What came out was these 5 building blocks, and I'm cantering through this, so I apologise, but what it led to really was 5 questions that felt very powerful for the council. How can we promote and enable more personal interaction? How can we celebrate people's everyday efforts so that this feels more of a sort of celebrated journey? How can we validate every person's ability to contribute, the emphasis on everyone? And how do we provide the physical space to be and work together? And then crucially, this one at the centre that we've been needled with a lot, but actually what it seemed that people were asking for was kind of put more trust in us, like believe in us more. And so the thing that we're kind of putting at the heart of this inquiry going forward is what does it take to trust in the people we're kind of working with, not for, more? How do we sustain that and do that, which is feeling like a really generative question. So going back to this sort of the starting point narrative that we identified, if this is not the Kirklees way, shall we say, then what starts to come out of this identification of these questions and principles that starts to point to something? And I should say this is sort of working hypothesis, but we're kind of going, actually maybe it's not we provide services, maybe it's we create conditions, and actually the response we want is people make the places where they live better rather than we do it for them. And then maybe we can hold that result of Kirklees Thrives much more consciously without something else kind of getting in the way of it. And there was a lovely quote that we found in a very early officer survey in this, as we were digging around this process, which shows that this insight is very much there already. We're just naming something and allowing it to come out. But we can't change outcomes. We need to help people change outcomes. That's a reality that's recognised already. And so the work from here is then going, okay, back to here. If we think we've got like at least a hypothesis of what the narrative might want to become, that it is the sort of a council as creator of conditions rather than just a service provider. It is enabling people to make their own places better rather than doing it for them. how do we then sustain that through what rituals need to change, and what totems might kind of carry that? And there's just to share a couple of the ritual piece that we're going to be kind of treating as the heart of our work over the next year or so, and hopefully we'll be invited back to Notwestminster with glittering results. We'll be mainly talking about measures, actually. Because what we found when we were doing this work and talking to people is that when you then looked at the strategic plan and the sort of what the language of the organisation was, one of the most powerful things was that the 8th outcome in the Kirklees Council strategy is efficient and effective delivery. And so people might want to be talking about other things, but then they're immediately sort of beaten back by the measures, and measures are incredibly powerful things. And then just as totems, like what might those be, we're still exploring, like what are the big symbolic shifts, but just to give you an idea of one that struck Oliver and I walking through Huddersfield yesterday, and seeing customer service centre as enormous letters and language. So what is that carrying? I'm not saying we're going to be able to change that or even that we necessarily should, but it's just interesting when you start thinking, what are the sort of big symbols that carry a story? And start recognising and thinking how might we tweak those and shift those so that the space for a different narrative opens up. So what we're going to be doing in our workshop right now, we've got what we're going to be doing over the next year. One thing we're going to be working with Kirklees some more. Another thing we're hoping to do is gather a group of 6 councils. We often do this sort of work where we bring together groups of organisations from a sector and ask, like, what does this shift from consumer to citizen as a sort of basis of narrative mean? So we're hoping to do that. And within that, one of the so if anyone's interested in that, please do talk to us. And within that, one of the tools that we're hoping to kind of develop a bit more and see how it works in this sector is we've got this tool called the 7 Modes of Everyday Participation. We designed it and built it with the cooperative sector, actually, with the Co-op and Nationwide and the Phone Co-op and 1 or 2 others. And we're going to hack it now and see like how much of it's transferable to this world. So come and beat us up, tell us we've got it wrong, and maybe appreciate a little bit of what we might have to offer. You never know. But that's it for now.